Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, if you will please read the prepared announcement and call the roll.
April 25th, 2017, please be advised this meeting is being taped for video and audio broadcast. Assisted listening devices are available. Mr. Bonifant.
Here.
Mr. Corsello.
Here.
Mr. Hempstead. Mr. Kimmel.
Here.
Mr. Sachinelli.
Here.
Ms. Melendez.
Here.
Mr. Sarasis.
Present.
Ms. Bowman.
Here.
Mr. Sims.
Present.
Mr. Kides.
Here.
Ms. Maggio.
Present.
Mr. DePalma. Ms. O'Toole Giandirko.
Here.
Mr. Igneri.
Here.
Mr. Livingston.
Here.
13 present.
13 present, we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda, the acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 11th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Igneri moves. Do I have any corrections, deletions, additions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion, the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Ms. King.
Brenda Penn Williams.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Penn Williams. I reside at 21 Karen Drive, Norwalk, Connecticut. And I'm here to speak on the mall. 20 years ago, the city of Norwalk forced families and businesses out of their homes through eminent domain. To do what? Nothing. It was promised that affordable housing would be placed there. It didn't happen. The parcel was sold, then it was sold, then Spinnaker bought it, then Spinnaker sold it. Well, before Spinnaker sold it, it was promised that they were going to have housing there. Spinnaker sold it to GGP, where they changed the LDA to put a hotel instead of affordable housing. Now GGP is offering the city $3 million to amend the LDA. Once again, people had to give up their property, and the city was supposed to make sure that housing was to be built. Once again, the city is being bought by developers. This needs to stop. I am asking you to do not amend the LDA so they could not have the hotel. Also, please make sure that GGP keep their promise with Article 21. And Article 21 is where 10% of the total value of the cost of the project performed by the Norwalk-based business for the purpose of this provision. Only the terms best efforts shall include, but not limit to, the providing employment opportunities to DBEs during the construction of the project, which employs socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and the following priorities. Those who reside in the 3 highest poverty rate index zip code in the city, those who reside in the city in general, those who reside in Fairfield County, those who reside in the state of Connecticut. Further, job opportunities shall be publicized through established minority-related outreach website and organization. And I haven't seen that that has been done. So I'm just asking you to please make sure that they do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ben Williams.
Reverend Dancy.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Ray Dancy. I'm here tonight representing the Macedonia Church located at 39 West Avenue. The senior pastor is Reverend DeWitt Stevens, Jr. Macedonia Church is in support of the amendment to the LDA on behalf of GGP because the project will bring jobs, tax revenues, and a Class A commercial footprint to Norwalk. It's my understanding that GGP has done due diligence in terms of the hotel issue. The hotel being eliminated, of course, is disappointing to all, but as I understand it, GGP has spent a great deal of time trying to make a hotel work, but ultimately determined that it would not work due to the cost of and development of a hotel on this site. They worked with Norwalk Redevelopment Agency and third-party consultants, which came to the same conclusion. GGP later determined that residential and office uses would not be a viable alternative. In lieu of providing a hotel, office, or residential use on site, GGP will pay the city $3.5 million. These funds, as I understand it, would become part of a newly formed community development fund and used by the city for a broad mix of uses in the South Norwalk area, including housing initiatives, community-oriented facilities, and cultural programs for our youth, among others. The second modification or amendment to the LDA has to do with the anchor clarification. I don't need to go into any details about that. I'm pretty sure all of you have that, but we also are in favor of your approval of that. In conclusion, GGP has signaled that they will begin construction in May. They need to start to open. If they do not start in May, they will not be able to open in 2019. The Council and Redevelopment Agency need to approve these two issues, or construction will stop and the project will not happen. And I think that would be a disservice to Norwalk and to our community. So I thank you in advance for approving these proposed changes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dancy, and thank you for what you do with serving all vessels equally.
Thank you.
Marge Costa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marge Costa. I've been a Norwalk resident since 1985, and Reverend Dancy, I think you said it beautifully. I'm just here to show my support for GGP. I've been in Norwalk, as I said, for a long time. I've seen that space off of I-95 vacant for a very long time. I think GGP has been very diligent in their concerns about Norwalk citizens, traffic flow, everything you can imagine going into this mall. And I just think it would be very good for Norwalk, for jobs, for tax revenue, to go ahead with this project. And on a personal note, just organizations I'm involved with, in the city of Norwalk, GGP is very supportive of all organizations in Norwalk. I think they truly do care about Norwalk, so I would just encourage the council to strongly consider moving forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa.
Ann Haller.
Yes.
Okay. Reverend Curtis.
Your younger years, you could have jumped over that.
You know it. If I couldn't have jumped over, I could have come under. Good evening to you, Mr. Mayor, and to Common Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I stand as pastor of the Grace Baptist Church. We too are in favor. I've stood in this spot 2 or 3 times voicing my favorability, and my church is representing my church. We are very much in favor of this mall. We believe that the mall will be a boom for this city. It does not make any sense for us to go backwards. I'm always a deep believer in moving forward, and we see this mall as that opportunity. Having said that, this Article 21 of the LDA is an important part of this whole contract. It's an opportunity to certainly lift all boats, but there are some boats that are anchored much more solidly than others. This allows for the disadvantaged. This allows for what we used to call MBEs and WBEs, an opportunity to engage in prosperity. There aren't that many opportunities in our society these days. This is an opportunity that must not get passed. So what I'm asking of you is that you monitor, that you stay on top of this. People don't like to call it a set-aside, but that's what it is. And let's stay on top of it so that we make sure that those who can participate, participate. We don't want the mall to be built and then there be leftover dollars. We want to make every effort that everybody who wants to participate is enabled to participate. Thank you for your time. We will be watching.
Thank you, Reverend Curtis.
Clay Fowler. Diane Cella.
I think he may have run to another meeting. Yeah. If he comes back, we'll call him.
Good evening. Diane Cella, as Ms. King said, at 19 Blue Mountain Ridge Road. I'm here tonight just to speak on two very important issues. It's not easy, I'm sure, being in your shoes, in your seats, but tonight I ask you please to remember that in all the 32 years I've lived in Norwalk, plus, I've tried to assist, seek due diligence on the part of staff as well as council members, and study and ask and participate actively. Tonight I have two comments. The first is in the appointment for Adam. I have witnessed for many months and years his performance on the Zoning Commission, and I do feel that he was appointed at a time when it was not easy, and I am very happy for some of the initiatives that he began. He chaired the Zoning Task Force, a monumental effort. He tried to make sure that we had, of course, a new planning and zoning director. I'm sure he participated with that. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate anyone's effort in serving as a volunteer. But I've also witnessed some things that give me pause, and I only want to utilize it as an example of how I would like to see Adam do better in order, because I'm sure because the mayor has put forth his name, of course, you look at the votes. So it's a cautionary tale, but I have hope. So the first is the BJ's wholesale site of Elinco. What I'm concerned about is for 4 years there was an opportunity, even with some, as I said, some MOSHA holdovers, to change the zone. Now the thing is, when you're in leadership position, you pivot, you move around if you come up to problems. And so we had 2 or 3 zoning commissioners who are no longer there, and I'm pleased they're no longer there, and I appreciate the mayor and all of you in finding other people. However, the leadership on changing the zone after we had several studies on the main avenue. Long story short is, I looked at the voting record, which we should always seek to do as citizens as well as those of you, on enforcement, on expanding AMEC down on Crescent Street. Adam was the deciding vote, and it was a poor decision on the part of the Zoning Commission. I'm sure he's one of many, but he was the leader. So I'm hoping and I expect that after his confirmation, that he will make sure that he handles his duties in a transparent way, and he does his due diligence, and he recuses himself when his law firm has a conflict of interest, because they do real estate law. It's really important now with the TOD coming up. My second comment is just about item C1, the Planning Committee. And I welcome to speak with Adam. Again, thank you for serving, but I'm not sure he is ready for this. But item C1 on Planning Committee, I think I have one more minute. I ask that you please do not vote for this project, these amendments. I ask that you spend one more 2-week session to go back and reason with GGP. I have admired a lot of the work they've done. I wasn't in favor of them all, but since all of you and others have been, I've said, okay, let's go with it. But let's make sure it's the best project for Norwalk as possible. And I emailed you all about some offers. I do not think that you should let any developer remove the mixed use component. There are other choices. Now, maybe they weren't initially part of the choices given by Mr. Sheehan and Redevelopment Agency, but there are viable choices such as a YMCA, and what is becoming hot in other cities of our size is an incubator space. I could just see in the red X that was on the program to knock out the hotel sitting above Bloomingdale's, I'd love it to be the Beehive, where you have co-working space, an incubator for business. These types of things are happening in other cities, and that would fulfill not only putting GGP in better stead as really being willing to work with the community and fulfill their promise to us about mixed use, it would show our city does stick to what we make developers promise. And lastly, it would be really cool for our city to have these things. A YMCA, others have mentioned a Boys and Girls Club. So I ask that you put this on hold, table it, talk to Adam and others, Mr. Hennessy, and see if you can wrestle out and discuss a real mixed use, because this is not what we were promised. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lauricella.
Clay didn't come in, did he?
No, he's not here yet.
Sha Tico Fleming?
Hi, good evening. My name is Sha Tico Fleming. I reside at 261 Eli Avenue, Building 22, Apartment 1D. I am here to vote in favor for the mall due to the fact that there is jobs needed here. There's not many options we have here in Norwalk, especially if you don't have a bachelor's degree or higher. So for us that are still pursuing our education and things of that sort, I feel like a retail place or a mall or things like that would be best in best interest for us younger ones that haven't been able to complete our career course yet. And I believe it'll bring in a lot of money as far as taxes and as far as keeping our money here in Norwalk, talking from a person that loves to shop. I believe that I would rather spend my money here in Norwalk versus heading to another city or another town where my kids don't see the benefit from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming.
Winnie Mola?
I don't see Winnie here. Is Winnie Mola here? Oh, hi, Winnie. I didn't see.
Good evening. My name is Winnie Mola. I live at Little Fox Lane in Norwalk, and I'm here representing myself and my husband. I'm a real estate broker. I own my own firm, and I'm a past president of the Board of Realtors and was honored several years ago with the title of Realtor Emeritus. My 43 years as a real estate broker and a lifelong resident of Norwalk gives me great insight and perception of our community and its ongoing future. Our community at times has had an image perception, as we are in the midst of several wealthy communities who have had the good fortune to attract some high-end luxury retail stores, and I have enjoyed shopping there. However, I have always hoped that one day we would have a Bloomingdale's and/or a Nordstrom in our community. A pipe dream? Yes, maybe. Over 25 years ago, I was standing in front of our then-present council, and I spoke in favor of developing this property. We are now hopeful will be our Sono Collections. I remember well that a young Doug Adams had just joined Stan Seligsohn's company, and he was representing his company in developing this very property that we are here tonight discussing. Doug and I never gave up on the property. We both knew it would be something very special. Unfortunately, much time passed and there were many delays. Then the economy in 2007 took a deep plunge in real estate, and real estate development came to a halt. In the past few years, we have seen Norwalk begin a vibrancy with so many new projects. Exciting things are beginning to happen again. The most exciting to me is to have GGP select our community to build Sono Collections. We are the envy of our surrounding communities. A Nordstrom and a Bloomingdale's to anchor a high-end mall. Yes, the hotel was a nice addition. I jokingly told my husband we should sell our beloved home and take a suite in the hotel, and I could spend my days shopping in the mall for my grandchildren and family. No longer have to drive out of town. However, if the present economy and the statistics show that the hotel is not a viable option for this project to proceed, we should support GGP's decision and move post-haste with this phenomenal project called Sono Collections. This, in my opinion, is a coup for Norwalk. A major developer, GGP, has chosen our community to build this beautiful mall. It has taken us over 25 years to develop this dormant piece of property, and losses of hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue, and now we are on the brink of starting this project, which will enhance and showcase our community. And I ask our Mayor Rilling and our council members and our citizens to wholeheartedly support the Sono Collection, even without the hotel, and grant them permission and help fast-track them in seeking the permits to start building immediately. Sono Collection will bring our community great pride and recognition, but even more importantly, jobs and tax revenue and sales tax revenue, and increase our property values. I urge all of our officials here tonight to grant this change and move forward with great haste. How lucky we are to have been chosen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mola. Hi, Joe.
Diane CC.
Good evening, Diane CC, 37 Olmsted Place in Norwalk. I did send a lengthy email to all members of the council today, going through a lot of the justification and the technical reasons for why I'm urging you to vote no tonight and to reject the advancement of the draft of the amendment agreement. So I urge you to read that. The basis for your discussion tonight, though, I want to remind you, and the subsequent vote, were what I've dubbed backroom negotiations that happened to bring it to this point. And they were reported widely in the press as having reached an agreement, not a tentative agreement, not something that was up for discussion, but for all intent and purposes a fait accompli. I'm asking you to vote no for all the reasons that I outlined earlier today. But I also ask that you consider the position of the city leadership that negotiated this deal. When I read to you the following two quotes that came from Mayor Rilling in support of this. It reported in the press today and last night at the, I guess it's a DTC meeting, Mayor Rilling was quoted as, "We know that it's really a great project for the city. It's going to bring jobs while the construction is going on, and it's going to bring in jobs when they open up," end quote. But I want to backtrack a few years now to 2013 to then candidate Rilling in his first election, less than 2 weeks from Election Day, when there was just an inkling of an idea of a mall at that time. And the quote then in the media was that the city needs to know what GGP has in mind. And the quote from the mayor, quote, is, "A mall generally does not generate good revenue stream in taxes," he said. "They don't pay taxes on their inventory. They pay taxes on the footprint. They bring in low-paying jobs. And in the Financial Times, there was a report recently that said 15% of the nation's malls will fail within the next 5 years. So before we move ahead with transfer of any development rights, we really need to sit down, let the public know what the plans are going to be before we move forward. It's silly to move forward unless you know what the plans are that are going to be implemented." End quote. So to me, well, it's not even just more silly, but it's substantially more serious tonight that you'd move forward with plans that continue to be written at the whim of the developer with virtually no benefits to the taxpayers of Norwalk. And there's more of that outlined in the email that I sent you today. So I'm asking you to vote no on authorizing the structuring of Amendment 5 to the plan and to the LDA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. CC.
Patsy Brescia?
You say Clay Lemon.
No, I'm asking.
Oh, I don't see him. When we're about finished, ask if he's here, and then we'll see him out.
Good evening. Patsy Brescia. I live at 136 East Avenue, across the street. I was an early supporter of the mall, as you all know, because I've been at many of the meetings. I've tried to make all of them, but that wasn't possible. But I'm here again tonight. And again, I want to expand on why I started out being in favor of the mall and why I am very much in favor of it tonight also. And that is, I spent 6 years, like you, as a member of the council, as majority leader, as president of the council, and spent a lot of time in that corridor of Norwalk, trying to rebuild the threads of Norwalk from Norwalk to South Norwalk and to pull our community together as a whole. I was chairman of the school building committee when we built Jefferson School, and now it's the most populated school in elementary school in Norwalk. We fought hard to replace that school. Many people felt we didn't need that school in the middle of the center. It burned down, as you probably recall, over Easter weekend. It was opened in 1970. As co-chairman of the Department of Public Works Committee, I was the liaison between the city of Norwalk and the state for the construction of Route 7. I cut the ribbon with Mayor Zullo at the time of that construction. I have spent decades in that corridor working publicly and privately, at 35 years as a leader of the YMCA, 10 years on the hospital board, 18 years at the Lockwood Matthews Mansion, of which I am now chairman of the board, and I am vice chairman of our public library on West Avenue. I mention these things because in '75 I ran for mayor, and the major discussion in 1975, which, counting on my fingers, I think is 42 years ago, the issue was, what are we going to do with Reed Putnam? It wasn't just 20 years ago or 25 years ago, as Winnie mentioned. It really began 50 years ago, and with the construction and the cutting through of Norwalk of I-95, and then a few years later, the construction of Route 7. It gutted the center of our community. I view this mall as an opportunity to bring our city together, to connect South Norwalk, to connect Wall Street, to bring a vitality and an attractiveness to the center of our town as people pass through it. I am a licensed real estate broker, have been for 40 plus years, and I have mostly worked in construction, new projects, developments, condominiums, homes, and other major buildings. And I have an experience through the years, the ebb and flow of the real estate market, the development market, the growth market of communities. And there have been opportunities over the last 40-some years to have something to be done with Reed Putnam. But every time it got to the point of almost happening, the market changed. And the proposed ideas for development there were no longer economically viable. In other words, they didn't work in the private sector. The developers couldn't make a profit. We have an economy and a culture that's based on capitalism, and spurring our economy is to make money. So to jeopardize or to criticize an investor because he's going to make money doesn't make a lot of sense in our basic structure. The arguments that I've seen recently in the paper are interesting, and I can see people's concerns over certain things, but when you look back over 42 years, when nothing has been done with that property of any substance, and you calculate the loss of job opportunities for our people, the loss of creating an improved image of our community, and the loss of tax revenue to our community. If you want to go forward and say, okay, you're going to lose 45 million over the next 15 years, you're talking about 3 million a year. But if you want to go back in time with figures and you say for 42 years we didn't get that $3 million, that's $126 million of income to our city, which would have paid for a lot of our schools. So please support this. Let it happen for Norwalk. Let us no longer be that hole in the donut. Let us really have a wonderful center for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Brescia.
Clay Fowler. Clay Fowler. We've been waiting on you.
Hard act to follow, Patsy, isn't it? Hi. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. I'm Clay Fowler, and I'm Chairman and CEO of Spinnaker Real Estate Partners. And as you know, we've had a long involvement with 95.7 in Reed Putnam, dating back 10 years ago when we first purchased the property, and having sold it recently, 3 years ago, to GGP. Oh, by the way, I think you already have a letter from me, but I'm going to amplify on that just slightly for just a couple minutes. I know good speech is a really short one. I would suggest that few people understand the difficulties and nuances of developing this property, this really important property, more fully than Spinnaker. Similarly, I understand the responsibility on the shoulders of you and the rest of the city agencies in reviewing, improving, and potentially modifying any applicant's plan, particularly one as weighty as that of GGP. I and my team have also been under GGP's tent during the approval process and now in pre-construction mode. In fact, as to the hotel, we've evaluated on our own sake for purchase and construction and know it from our own analysis to be infeasible, and support the proposed amendment to the plan eliminating the requirement for the construction of the hotel. My second point relates to GGP's request to add flexibility to the definition of anchors of high quality. We all know, we read it in the paper just about every day, that retail is rapidly changing. I think we know it in our own lives. And I would think that we would do well to attempt a bit of future-proofing of the project in considering a small modification in return for a large benefit in terms of the boost in jobs, payments to the city, and a large permanent increase in tax revenue, as Patsy pointed out. We have one of the country's smartest, most successful retail developers working with us. To second guess them would be like me telling Bechtel how to build the Tappan Zee Bridge, or me telling GE how to build a nuclear power plant. Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's are committed to come to Sono and Norwalk. Let's show our commitment to them by moving these modifications to a final decision and approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. There was a young lady that passed. Would you care to address the council? Yes.
Ann Haller.
Hello, my name is Ann Holler. With all this talking, I wasn't really as familiar with the mall as I should be. But I would like to ask, everybody seems to be in favor of it, but I'd like to throw a wet blanket on it. I want to make sure that the mall is also safe for us. We have several malls in this state, and they've all had one problem after another, gang riots and other stuff like that. And several of the malls have police stations or police sections in the mall. And I'd like to know what's the plans of this mall company and the city to provide safety for citizens that will be visiting it. And that's my question.
Thank you. Sorry. That's all that have signed up to address them all. Is there anybody else? This young lady and then Mr. Adams? Who's that? I can't see.
Can't see who it is.
No.
That's why I'm asking.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I apologize for not being here early enough to sign on, but you do know I do want to speak.
If you could state
I
your
am
name.
Sweet Melody from Sono Entertainment and Recording Studios.
We know Sweet Melody.
Everyone knows Sweet Melody, and everyone knows I support GGP with this mall. And the lady mentioned low-paying jobs, but I think low-paying jobs beats no-paying jobs, right? I mean, so I'm not understanding why are we against this mall? And like Ms. Patsy said, it's a pleasure to see her because I've read different things about her and I know the history of her. And it is a big hole in the middle of town. And who on earth, why do you want to get off Route 7 connector and see this green tarp around? And my uncles lived on Putnam Avenue when I was a little girl. So I know when he had to move, I know when they knocked it down, I know how long it's been vacant, I know when Maritime Motors left, all this stuff that we know. And we know that it looks awful for Norwalk. So for someone like GGP, who is this prestigious developer, again, I just don't understand why would anybody say no. I mean, where are we here and what are we doing? And even if the mall is successful, even during the building stages only, we do have that income coming to Norwalk. We do have these jobs coming to Norwalk. We have other things to do with the children coming to Norwalk. I'm a local business owner right down the street from the mall, so I'm excited. We're excited because it's going to increase foot traffic, perhaps. And they're going to straggle on and wonder, what is Sono Entertainment and Recording Studios? And they're going to want to record. So we're going to blow up because of this mall. So, you know, I like to make everyone laugh, but in all seriousness, Mr. Mayor, please just pass it. Enough of this. We're dragging our feet. It's like a ball and chain. I mean, we loved them already, the whole town. And I'm just so happy that more people are here to support the mall. So I'm just here once again to be heard, seen, and written up by Nancy on Norwalk, you know, because I love it. So thank you, Nancy. But seriously, thank you for the community of Norwalk coming out and showing how important such an establishment is for Norwalk and how excited we all are. So GGP, I just applaud you. Just for doing it for Norwalk. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
And thank you, and I always enjoy your live Facebook postings.
Oh, yeah.
This gentleman want to speak?
And I think this gentleman here, who reminded me of Doug Adams, but I didn't know who it was, so.
He was sitting in the dark.
And if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Bill Finger. I'm the president of WR Sono Corporation, a 25-year owner of property on North Main Street in South Norwalk. I stood here about 25 years ago in front of the Common Council when I came to attempt to redevelop the Seatown supermarket that used to be on North Main Street into what is today the Regent Cinema. So I've seen a lot of the history pass by about Reed Putnam and West Avenue. So today I'm here to speak in support of the amendments to the LDA with GGP. It's important that what be built on the mall site be financially feasible and be a sustainable development, not just for now, but in the decades that follow. It would be short-sighted not to be thinking about the future when we sit here today. Among the many benefits that the presence of the Sono collection will bring to South Norwalk is the substantial spillover in spending for the merchants that are currently in South Norwalk. They need that. Over the years, we've seen the ebb and flow of traffic on the streets and the business for the merchants. This is a unique opportunity to place Sono back into the consciousness of Fairfield, of the rest of Fairfield County and the surrounding areas. So again, I implore you to please support and approve the amendments to the LDA. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is the end of the public participation.
There's a couple more hands there.
Oh, a couple of more hands? Okay. Mr. Hennessy, you stood up first, and then I can't see the gentleman over there, but okay. Mr. Hennessy.
I just wanted to make a point of clarification. We're under the impression that we will be asked to make a...
Yes, Mr. Kites will be called, yes.
We will reserve any comments.
Okay. This gentleman here, and then the young lady over here. And then we'll have to close the public participation session. Thank you. And if you would please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Name is Bob Welch, and I live at 81 Wolf Pit Avenue. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. You thought you were done with the mall back in 2015 when you approved revisions to the LDA, and here we are again on what seems like Groundhog Day. You have a big decision in front of you, and that is the deal that's in front of you for revising the LDA one that's balanced and equitable for Norwalk? I met with the GGP reps, and they were forthcoming with numbers. They talked about what it cost to build the mall, they talked about what it cost to build the hotel, and they talked about their rate of return. Based on those numbers, it seems to this layman like they have a $2 million yearly gap between the return that they want and the return that they have if they build the hotel along with the mall. Now, GGP might dispute these figures, but they are based on numbers that they gave me. How will you know what's right, what the right numbers are? You deserve advice from an independent, professional real estate analyst who's not involved with the project in any way. Because you want Norwalk to have confidence that what you're conceding to GGP is balanced with what you're getting in return. As it stands right now, the developer appears to gain $2 million a year in profit that it doesn't currently have under the current LDA. In exchange for that, they're paying $200,000 per year in a lump sum that equates to a period of 17 and a half years. So all of the people who spoke today very eloquently about the additional jobs and the many benefits that will come to Norwalk from the mall, I agree with them, and I support those goals. And I also support a balanced deal for Norwalk. And it just strikes me that a payment of $200,000 in exchange for a gain in profit of $2 million is a little bit out of balance. And I hope you will engage an independent professional real estate consultant to advise you on that. I have a copy of my op-ed piece that appeared in the Hour today, and I here for each of you. And thanks very much for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And the young lady up here. And if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Jeanie Yoon. I reside at 33 North Water Street. I've lived in Norwalk for approximately 27 years, and I've owned on Washington Street as well as in the in the past 10 years, the newly built Maritime, which is part of the Reed Putnam development. I have not so much whether I'm pro-mall or not, but something that I'd like, 3 issues that I'd like the mayor and the council to consider. One is, if there is a $3.5 million payment, we would like a portion of this to really remain and stay within the Reed Putnam district. And doing research, we've seen that there have been several objectives over the past 25 some odd years, and most of them have been realized, including this last part, the last 2 parcels where the mall will be built. However, one of the objectives really hasn't been truly addressed, which is enhancing the public access to the enjoyment of the Norwalk waterfront. And I would like the council to basically continue to fully realize this objective, not just to put the mall up but to really sort of make this not just business, but a place where people are coming to visit and use the waterfront. I think we've started it, but I would really like the council to continue with that. And I think allocating part of the $3.5 million might do that. The second point that I have after doing some research is I'd like the Common Council, or I have a few questions about the circulator. I understand that there was a $550,000 payment to the city, or there will be. I'm wondering what the remainder of the cost is and who will be running it, and how will that affect sort of the traffic and the flow. I've lived through a few. I know that a big issue with Norwalk has been sort of moving people to places, and I've seen a short-lived bus shuttle going to the train station. So I'm a bit concerned how that's going to run, and especially as someone who lives in the Reed Putnam district, how that's going to affect traffic. So I really would like the council to consider that. And is a circulator actually necessary? I don't know. But if it's not, what does happen to the $550,000? Does that remain within Reed Putnam, or does that go somewhere else? And the third point I'd like to make is GGP is seeking to amend the language using the phrase anchors of high quality. And I understand that this is to include non-retail stores. They've sort of said, listen, if we can't get another Neiman's type or another Nordstrom's, we're asking to sort of amend the language. And what I'm asking the Common Council to consider is, why is GGP now requesting a revision to the language when, at the meeting that I was at last week, they said they would not have changed the parenthetical language had there not been a change to the hotel? To me, that's very interesting, because if it's just a hotel change, that should be addressed. I understand that the 2 anchors are in for 10 years, but GGP has a commitment to the town for 15 years. Why the change in language? Does that conveniently occur with the hotel, or is that something that's slightly overly flexible? I'm asking the Common Council to consider that if a non-retail Class A establishment, such as a grocery store, a kids zone, or a family entertainment center, is to become part of the mall, it should be reviewed and approved by zoning at that point. Because if we have these anchor stores for 10 years, and GGB's got a 15-year already, let's review it back then. Why do we have to all of a sudden say, hey, it's okay to put what is deemed as what they deem as Class A? Perhaps ultimately the language should remain as it is, and GGP wants to bring in an alternative Class A anchor. It should be dealt with at zoning. Those are my 3 concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Here are, I'd like to submit this. This is the original objectives. Talk about renewal of the waterfront.
Thank you. That will close the public participation. I thank everybody for taking their time to speak. Next item under the mayor's section, resignations and appointments. After consultation with Mr. Blank during the day today, he has asked that I withdraw his name or table the nomination, so I am doing that. Under mayor's remarks, as you know, we had this past week our annual citywide cleanup, and I want to thank the people that came out. I believe, if my numbers are correct, we had over 100 people, 125 people volunteer to come out and help clean up the streets of City of Norwalk and the parks and the riverbeds and all kinds of things. And it was really gratifying to see so many people coming out and caring about it. And at that, when we kicked it off, I mentioned that it's great that we do this on a citywide basis once a year. But I think it's our responsibility, everybody's responsibility, every day of the year to be good, responsible citizens and help clean up our city. We removed 2.3 tons of debris and hauled it away, half a ton of metal, 9 tires, 2 propane tanks. And our DPW crew members were very instrumental in making it happen, and I want to thank our DPW. They work very hard every single day. They work clearing our snow at night when we're all sleeping. The kids are praying that they don't get the schools cleaned so they don't have to open schools, but they do a good job and they try to get that done as well. And oftentimes they are the unheralded heroes of snowstorms and other kind of weather issues that we all take for granted and we stay home. I want to thank every team. There were many teams that came out and we sponsored, participated across the city. We also have coming up the 2017 Spring Bulky Item Collection Schedule. You can find that on our city website, but I'll read it. It's a Saturday, 4/29 for residents with Thursday garbage. Saturday, 5/6 for residents with Friday garbage. Items must be at the curbside before 7 a.m. of their scheduled collection day. Now, that's just for now. I've been meeting with the DPW director, and we are going to implement a program of bulky waste pickup on call. So if somebody has bulky waste that they would like to have picked up, we can call DPW and make a schedule, and they will end up coming and picking it up on time at your property, so that a lot of times we find people that have refrigerators and sofas and mattresses and other things, and they don't know what to do with them. So oftentimes they're left on the sides of the streets, and we want to try to avoid that. The 2017 Spring Yard Waste Collection Schedule, May 8th through 12th. Garbage collection, residents with Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday garbage collection. And May 15th through 19th, residents with Thursday and Friday garbage collection. And also next week is Small Business Week. We in Norwalk support our small businesses. We encourage more small businesses to locate here, to make Norwalk their home. And we will be celebrating with Norwalk small businesses, along with the Small Business Association, visiting various locations, showcasing them and trying to help them flourish. We will also be with our Economic Development Director, who's here this evening, and other people in the city. We will be running some various small business seminars, along partnering with the Chamber of Commerce, to help people who want to open a small business or who want to relocate here find the resources that they need, find low interest loans and those kinds of things, working with SCORE to help them develop a business plan. So anybody that wants to open a small business, or if you know somebody that does, keep your eyes on the prize. We'll be doing that very soon. So thank you very much. And now I turn it over to Council President, Mr. Igneri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go right to the consent calendar this evening, and Ms. Bowman will be reading the consent calendar tonight, and the next council meeting, Mr. Cella will be reading it. So with that, I'd like to point out, especially since we have a lot from Recreation and Parks here, if you're on the consent calendar and you hear the item read, that means it will be passed. And after it's voted on and passed, feel free to leave if you don't want to sit here the rest of the night. With that said, Ms. Bowman?
This is the consent calendar. Item 6B1, resolved that a sum not to exceed $40,000 be and the same is hereby transferred from contingency to the Corporation Council Department to cover the cost of ongoing expenses pertaining to tax appeals and the Walk Bridge project. The account is noted. Item 7A1, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Rilling to enter an agreement with Norwalk Lacrosse Association, Inc. for the use of Veterans Park for a lacrosse jamboree, Pound on the Sound, to be held Saturday, June 10th, 2017, and Sunday, June 11th, 2017, from 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. each day. Set up to take place Friday, June 9th, 2017, at 3 p.m. with tear down no later than 8:30 p.m. on Sunday, June 11th, 2017. Estimated attendance 2,500 plus. Item 7A3, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with the National Marine Manufacturers Association to use Taylor Farm, Cap Pasture Beach, Shady Beach, and Marvin School for parking during the boat show to be held Thursday, September 21st, 2017 through Sunday, September 24th, 2017. Item 7A4, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with the Room to Grow to use Oyster Shell Park for an obstacle course fun run to be held Sunday, October 1st, 2017 from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Set up to take place on Sunday, October 1st, 2017 at 7 a.m. with tear down no later than 7 p.m. on Sunday, October 1st, 2017. Estimated attendance 100 plus. Item 7A5A, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with the Lupus Foundation of America to use Calf Pasture Beach for a walk to end lupus now, Connecticut, to be held Sunday, October 15, 2017, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Set up to take place at 11 a.m. on Sunday, October 15, 2017, with tear down no later than 8 p.m. on Sunday, October 15, 2017. Estimated attendance 500 plus. Item 7A5B, approve the use of the Showmobile by the Lupus Foundation of America for use at Veterans Park for their walk to end lupus now, Connecticut, on Sunday, October 1st, 2017. Item 7A6, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into a contract with JTL Industries, LLC, DBA Dalton Track and Tennis for project number 3740, tennis and basketball court, crack repair, color coding, and stripping for a sum not to exceed $93,996. Accounts are noted. Item 7A7, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with the Marching Band, Inc., MBI, to use the Andrews Field parking lot for a carnival to be held Thursday, June 15, 2017, from 6:15 p.m. to 10 p.m., Friday, June 16, 2017, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday, June 17th, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., and Saturday, June 17th, 2017, from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Set up to take place Monday, June 11th, 2017 at 8 a.m. with tear down no later than 12 noon Sunday, January 18th, 2017. Estimated attendance 500 plus. Item 7A8, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with the Rowayton School PTA to use Rowayton School field and grounds for their school carnival to be held Friday, May 12, 2017, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Saturday, May 13, 2017, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., set up to take place Thursday, May 11, 2017, at 10 a.m. with tear down no later than 6 p.m., noon, 6 p.m., noon on Sunday, May 14, 2017. Estimated attendance 500 plus. Item 7B1, accept and approve the report of the Claims Committee dated April 13, 2017. Item 7B2, for informational purposes only, negative on tax collections dated April 13, 2017. Item 7B3, for informational purposes only, monthly tax collectors report dated March 31st, 2017. Item 7B4, authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Thomson Reuters Westlaw for subscription services related to legal research for a sum not to exceed $78,446. Account is noted. That's the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is the council okay with the consent calendar as read?
Mr. Igneri, I just want to maybe save us a technical correction in the future on the under Parks and Rec number 6, where it says JTL Industries. In the backup material, they're calling it TJL Industries.
Okay.
I just want to mention that. So, if you want to make that correction now.
Okay, then I guess I have to amend that. Can I just correct it?
Which is right.
Mike, is that correct? It's TJL, right? Okay.
You should amend it rather than just accept it. So
it was wrong.
You don't like it. Then I'll take that off the consent calendar.
Really?
Yeah. And then we'll amend it.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be discussed. Thank you for bringing that to me.
I didn't want to waste your time on a technical correction in the future.
Any other changes to the calendar? If not, go for a vote. All in favor of the consent calendar as read? It looks unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I will turn the council back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Igneri. Item 7A2A, Mr. Sims.
Yes, on the Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Affairs Committee, item 7A2A, authorize the Mayor Harry W. Reverend to enter an agreement with the Norwalk Seaport Association to use the Veterans Park for the annual Oyster Festival to be held Friday, September 8th, 2017, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., Saturday, September 9th, 2017, from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., Sunday, September 10th, 2017, from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., set up to begin Friday, August 25th, 2017. We're tearing down no later than Saturday, September 30th, 2017. Estimated attendance, 30,000. Proposed admission prices are noted. And item 2B, approve the use of the showmobile by the Norwalk Seaport Association for the use of Veterans Park during the Norwalk Oyster Festival on Friday, September 8th, 2017 through Sunday, September 10th, 2017. That is.
And do you move that item?
I move that item.
Mr. Sims moves the item. Mr. Bonifant, please let the record show that Mr. Bonifant recuses himself. Any discussion on the item? All in favor, please signify. All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Bonifant, are you listening? Mr. Sims, do we now have item 7A6 for the amendment? Mr. Bonifant pointed out a difference in the stated language in the agenda and the backup material. Under contact with JTI Industries or JTL?
Wasn't in you read it?
It should read TJL.
It should be TJL.
So it's CJL, is that it?
TJL.
TJL.
Tennis. It means tennis.
So we would need an amendment by Mr. Sims
Okay.
to.
I'll make an amendment to change the order from JTL Industries LLC to TJL as a correction. TJL Industries LLC. It will read item 7A6, authorizing Mayor Harry W. Rilling to enter into contract with TJL Industries LLC, TBA Adult and Track and Tennis for project number 3740, tennis and basketball courts, crack repair, color coding, and striping for a sum not to exceed $93,996, and dual accounts are noted.
Okay, Mr. Sims amended item 7.6A. All in favor of the amendment? So carries. And now, Mr. Sims, do you want to move the item?
Yes, I'd like to move that item.
Mr. Sims moves the item. All in favor of item 7A6? All opposed? Abstentions? So carries. Thank you. Mr. Kites, item 7C1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move this item. I'll read it real quick and then speak to it, please. Item C1, approve city and redevelopment agency staff to modify the Reed Putnam Urban Renewal Plan and Amendment Number 4 of the Land Disposition Agreement as requested by Norwalk Land Development LLC, GGP, and to undertake all actions required to prepare the respective documents for the Common Council's final approval. As we all know, General Growth Properties has requested modifications to the original agreement, and for clarification, the item in front of us tonight is not the final agreement. but is allowing staff to begin the process, and that process will include votes not just by the redevelopment agency, planning commission, planning committee, and this full council. And I strongly believe that a project that will produce in excess of $5 million annually in tax revenue and over 2,400 full-time jobs should at least have its developer heard and their requests entertained. So I'm asking this council to move this forward tonight and allow the city to begin negotiations with GGP and hopefully come to an agreement that will be acceptable for both parties. And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to, GGP will be providing us with a brief synopsis of what they're requesting. But before I do that, I'd like to bring Mr. Sheehan up here to give us a quick description of, or clarity on what we're voting on tonight and the process moving forward, because there are some misconceptions that somehow we're approving the language that we've received in our backup data.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cotty. Mr. Sheehan.
I believe the question is what exactly is the approval for this evening and how it relates to the documents, the supporting documents in your package.
That is correct.
There are two things that ultimately need to happen. One is the modification to the urban renewal plan, and the other is the modification to the land disposition agreement. Assuming that there is the council advances favorably the action tonight to allow us to modify those documents so that the process to review those documents can begin by the various parties that are required to review them, both statutorily and as general practice in terms of the approval process for such documents through the city. Those documents would be modified and then submitted as modified documents for the various committees and authorities to consider. That would ultimately be the redevelopment agency would be responsible for its review of the urban renewal plan and actually the review of the land disposition agreement. Typically, when there's a modification with regards to a land disposition agreement and an urban renewal plan, it's forwarded to the Planning Commission for its comment. We would also make the modification and forward it to the Planning Commission for their consideration, and they would then advise the Common Council of their thought process with regards to the modification. In terms of the urban renewal plan, statutorily the redevelopment agency is required to put it out for a 30 to 5 day public comment period, what the modification would be, and then ultimately at the end of that 35-day period, at a point that the redevelopment agency would determine, the agency would be able to hold a public hearing with regards to the modification and then ultimately take up its consideration of the language that's being requested. And then ultimately all of those documents would then track back through the Planning Committee and then come back to the Common Council. So you're clearly not ultimately finally approving any document this evening.
So the language that we're seeing in front of us tonight is not the approved language. It needs to go through the processes you
that is correct.
Explained.
You are only authorizing us to make a modification so it can be presented to the various boards and committees that need to review that language as part of the document. Right. And ultimately, part of this process is if we made those changes without both the redevelopment agency and the Common Council consenting to us making them, the question then comes back, who authorized staff to make those presentations back to the various committees and agencies.
Mr. Kimmel.
I'd like, Mr. Sheehan, just to make it crystal clear, let me create a hypothetical situation. Let's say, hypothetically, I'm sitting here and there's two issues floating around in my mind. Hotel, the absence of a hotel, and $3.5 million, these two issues. I know that GGP has the right under the LDA to request the modifications, to request the amendment. So would I be voting right now to begin the process to review the $3.5 million, Perhaps we would argue that it should be more or even less. Perhaps we would argue about during the process that we're about to ensue. So that would be when we would get into the question of the so-called the deal that we've been reading about in the paper, whether $3.5 million was acceptable, whether we did in fact want to demand the hotel, things like that. That would have to be something that would be part of the process that we're authorizing to begin tonight. We're not passing judgment on either the absence of a hotel or the $3.5 million. We are beginning a process to discuss that. Is that correct?
I think you are beginning a process to allow for modifications. If you weren't going to allow any modifications to happen, what would be the point in commencing the process?
But by beginning the process...
you're not, let me respond to your question. At any point in time, from here to the point that the Common Council actually approves the final document, changes can be made to that.
Right, and that would be, theoretically, it could be the $3.5 million figure, hotel, YMCA, incubators, all of that would be possibly, could only be discussed should we move forward tonight, so we can begin that discussion.
Yes, I would, again, this is all coming back through the Planning Committee, and I would assume that there would be a level of discussion within the Planning Committee as to all of those points.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Ms. Baggio.
Forgive me, I've been very sick the past couple of days, so I don't have much of a voice. And I also didn't have time to read all of this since I received it on Friday afternoon. So it might be in here somewhere or not, but by agreeing to reopen the negotiations, is it true that there's a set 60-day date to reopen and have everything decided on from start to finish?
A set
A set 60 days?
There was an outline of a timeline that ultimately the developer was advancing for consideration of the various modifications. Assuming that there's a level of support for the project, I think the city is going to try to keep as close to that timeline in terms of bringing this back up to you for final consideration within that window.
By approving the modification tonight, are we set to that?
You're commencing the process.
Commencing the process, but
you have no final approval of anything this evening.
Correct, but do we have a final approval of when it has to be all decided upon? Because it's going to have to now go to all these various things.
Ultimately, that's going to depend on the bodies that are reviewing it. We have the developers' stated intention as to what they would like to have in terms of a timeline. Obviously, if the various boards and committees going through the process are going to require more time, that's what they're going to require. And obviously, the council is in the same position. If it needs more time to consider this, then it needs more time.
Thank you.
Right. Mr. Igneri.
Just for clarification purposes, the process we're starting tonight will include public hearings?
Yes.
Okay. How many?
At the very least, I've heard back from the redevelopment agency that the redevelopment agency will have a public hearing both on the modification to the urban renewal plan and the modifications being requested to the land disposition agreement. I would make the assumption that the chair of the planning committee will also either participate in one of those public hearings and or have the planning committee have their own public hearing.
Yes, the planning committee will also have their own public hearing.
Okay. So there are 3 public hearings in which the public could have a voice?
Yes, and obviously there's public participation at every meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Sims.
Thank you. I just want to say, I've been a part of this Sona collection for some time now, in fact for a number of years, and I've been a huge supporter of the mall, as most of you know. However, I am a little disturbed that there's a request now to change the LDA, as amended based on the mall that's being taken out of the project. That was a big driver to me and some of the council members that sat on the council during that time. And for me, I think we should be looking to either putting a hotel or the apartments that as the LDA requested. And I'm still pretty much in favor of the mall. However, I think we can't lose sight that the LDA calls for us to have housing as part of it, or and I think that was one of the reasons why we made the adjustment from a mall to from apartments to a hotel to kind of satisfy that. And it seems like that we're kind of forgetting about our responsibility to the LDA. I would like to see something added in there that would either have some components of if it's whether it's on site or not. But I'd like to see something added in there that would be a part of either housing as part of this, or we have to put the hotel back or leave it as it is. So that I just want to make that clear, because I heard a lot of conversations and comments coming from the public and from the committee that they're in support of the Sona collection, and I am too. However, we do have a responsibility to make sure that housing either is part of this, or we stick with the original agreement of making sure the hotel is included. And that's all I want to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Further discussion, Mr. Bonifant.
Thank you very much. I just want to say I appreciate Mr. Kitey's announcing that somewhere in there the council will have some kind of public hearing through it, because that's great that a redevelopment or a planning commission would have but they don't have to answer to the public, and we do, right? You can't vote them out. You vote us out, and that's key, right? And if we're opening up the LDA, almost to Mr. Kimmel's point there about how much money, you know what? Throw that enterprise zone in the mix, and let's see what we can do with that one too, because maybe we can scale that back a lot. And to the people that came out here and implied that this has been going on for years and years and years, well, we just say that the city has always met its end of the bargain. It's the developers that keep coming back and saying, we got to make a change. And then we go along with it, and then you come back again. And then they flip the property to the next person. So don't ever think that the city isn't doing its part. We always meet our end of the bargain. Thank you.
Further discussion. Ms. O'Toole-Gianderco.
Thank you. I'm in favor of this project moving forward. We've all spent months and at this point years. I do have some concerns that I guess will somewhat be alleviated, because it was news to me that we will have public hearings. That had not been discussed prior to right now. I think the public deserves to understand how we got to 3.5 as the magic number to make the hotel go away. The public deserves to know, where is that money going to be spent? We heard tonight it's going to stay in South Norwalk. Is that the case? Will it be going to the city as a whole? How will it be used? And I think that's something we need to understand before we agree to that number. This 60-day turnaround could be tough. I mean, we've had special meetings, we've had joint meetings, we've done everything that we could to get this to the finish line that we thought we were already at, and here we are again. I know that in our planning meeting, and to Michelle's point, this is a pretty hefty chunk of backup to go through. Mr. Livingston brought up this change in definition of the Class A retailer. And in my mind, it's not a minor change. I understand that retail is changing. We all see that. We all hear that. But throughout the process, it was high quality tenants will be there. We hear Bloomingdale's, we hear Nordstrom, now we hear high-end entertainment center. I don't think any of us truly understand what that is. And maybe if it was a more fleshed out definition, you could give us some examples, maybe that will change some minds up here. I think there's a lot of potentials being thrown out after hearing this is what the project will be. And I think that's why there's concerns now as we're coming to a vote again. I would like to see the motion broken down into a couple different pieces, because I think we have some really big items that we're looking at tonight that really should not be moved as one big block item, but we'll see how that all unfolds.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of item 7?
Wait.
Pardon me?
I thought we were having
I thought,
Oh, yeah, I mean, I was waiting for somebody to ask them to come
we
down.
were having
If you'd like them to come down and make a presentation, that'll be fine.
we referred to that before we voted.
Okay. Pardon me?
There might be comments after they speak, that's why. I understand.
Yeah. Well, you can't. There is nothing to write down.
You want to start off? Let me begin while Doug Adams sets the PowerPoint up. For the record, I think you know I'm William Hennessy. I'm with Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. We represent Norwalk Land Development and the company that owns Norwalk Land Development, which is General Development, General Growth Properties. The property we're talking about, as you know, is the one depicted on the slide that's about to appear on your screen. For 3.5 years now, Norwalk Land has owned the property, has been the designated redeveloper under the LDA, and this is the last piece of property in the Reed-Putnam Urban Renewal District to be developed. And what's driving the urgency to this, and we do appreciate your very quick attention in getting this on the agenda, what's driving the urgency to this is a desire to not only begin developing the project, which is well underway, but to completing the project. And completing the project is critical to this endeavor, because the two anchors, which are Nordstrom's and which is Bloomingdale's, have a commitment from GGP to be in a position of occupying in October 2019. So unless we begin now, we don't complete. So that's what's driving the timeline here. It's not the usual, I will call it, purely selfish goal of a developer to be done. But in this case, we have tenants that we need to have in there, or we can't build it. So that's what's making this 60-day timeline so critical to us. Public hearings will be held on this. I want to give everyone assurance of that. In addition to the ones by the Planning Committee, I assume, and the ones that Mr. Sheehan described by the Redevelopment Agency, everybody has missed the fact that this needs to go to zoning also, and that will be the subject of a public hearing there. And that public hearing, like any zoning hearing, is noticed, and there will be not only in the paper but through mail. So I think in a very short period of time, there is going to be ample opportunity for the public to weigh in on the questions that come before it. The project, as you know, is fully approved as a, call it a 1 million plus or minus square foot retail center with a garage holding a little more than 3,000 automobiles, what we call public realm, which is both outdoor and indoor space that is highly developed and is programmable, and atop the southerly anchor department store, the Bloomingdale's store, is approved a 152-room boutique hotel. And that is really the driver that brings us before you tonight, because that hotel is not feasible for this project. And I know, and I apologize for the lump of paper we dropped on you, but I think if you go through it, most of it is studies and reports that talk about the feasibility of not only the hotel, but the other allowed substitute uses, which are residential and office use. And they're all at this project unfeasible and or don't make sense for this project. Now, what brings us here is the need to amend not only the LDA, but the urban renewal plan for this district and, frankly, for this project. Because as it's devolved down, what's left, as I told you, what's left of the district work is just this property, or these properties. So the LDA now requires that there be a mixed-use project which consists of public realm. Not less than 5% of the gross floor area needs to be public realm, and we are closer to 8%, well over the minimum. And 2 other uses out of a menu of 4 uses. So out of a menu consisting of retail, hotel, residential, or office, we have to select 2 of those uses. And of course, you know we selected retail and hotel. Now the LDA does allow for those uses, those non-public realm uses, to be substituted and changed, but you always need to have 2. The LDA is clear on the whole process for that to happen. What the LDA doesn't contemplate is what happens if only one of those uses is feasible. And that's our belief, and that's what most of this paper frankly addresses, our rationale for that. I'm glad Mr. Kitey's brought up what we're doing tonight, and I completely agree with everything Mr. Sheehan said. We aren't asking you for the final vote on this. What we're trying to do is get your sense and your support to move forward with the details of the proposed amendment to the LDA and the URP. That's all we're trying to do. So our rationale for the infeasibility is in that package of documents. Mr. Adams is here to discuss that in more detail, and I imagine as time goes on, you might have questions and you will ask appropriate people and we'll get the answers to those, but that's what we're trying to accomplish here tonight. So that at the end of the day, both the URP and the LDA continue to require public realm as a use and allow the redeveloper to have one other use. And in our case, we're clearly going to select the retail, and it is exactly the retail that was approved by the agency, that the Common Council saw on the Concept Master Site Plan, and the Zoning Board saw and approved in its deliberations. So that, just to clarify, that's what we want to do, why we want to do it, and what all this paper is really about. Now, in the midst of that, we also added language that had to do with the so-called anchors of high quality. Now, in the current LDA, there is a commitment and an obligation on, frankly, on the part of GGP for a period of 15 years from completion, so that pushes us out over 17 years from today, to maintain anchors of high quality as found in Class A malls. That's what the wording says. And there's even a parenthetical sentence that says anchors of high quality, parent, e.g., and then it lists a number of what we would call traditional, conventional retail department stores. But anchors of high quality is not a defined term in the document. And we anticipate, frankly, that, you know, over time, these things may change. This mall is being built not to be up for 15 years. This mall is being built to be up and be, you know, a proud part of this community for decades and decades. We had conversations among the drafters of this document about anchors of high quality. What did it mean? As long as it's an anchor found in a Class A mall, and it would be conventionally thought of as an anchor in a Class A mall, it could fill that role. And that is evolving and it's changing. Ms. O'Toole, Dimberko, you said, well, I want to know exactly what it is. We don't know what some of those things are because we are looking down the road. Because I want to be very clear, we have signed leases with 2 department stores. When this mall's opening, we expect a Bloomingdale's and a Nordstrom. If we can deliver by October 19, that's what will be in there, Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom. And they have operating agreements that, frankly, go past, I believe, the 10-year commitment. But at some point in the future, we may be in a position where we have to deal with substituting an anchor. We want to be in a position where we can do that responsibly and in a way that always maintains this as a Class A mall. Our goal is your goal in this endeavor. We are completely aligned in our interest. You should always want us to have a Class A mall, and we always want to have a Class A mall. And that's why we're trying to clarify that language. I don't think we're changing any definitions. I think we're working to clarify it. And if there's particular words in there that are particularly troublesome to you, there'll be a time and an opportunity to speak to this.
Can I comment? Can I speak for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
Since you know, I was one of the people who raised this at the last meeting, and I fully understand the need for some flexibility in the future because we don't know what the future holds, obviously. And I guess one of the things that strikes me is many people talk about how malls are not succeeding now, but yet, even as recently as last week, there was an article in the Times that said high-end malls are thriving, okay? So what I want to ensure is whatever we do in the language is that we ensure that it's a high-quality tenant. And by the way, I don't think that's necessarily synonymous with a Class A tenant. I think one is a little more, and Doug, you and I talked about this a little bit. I think there might be a distinction, and all I would say is in the process of moving this forward, I think we should examine that language more closely and see if we can sort of get comfortable with what it means to be high quality versus Class A.
Point taken, and we will bear that in mind as we go through this. That's the kind of dialogue that I think we need to have. We need to have it quickly because we've got to build this and get it up. But we need to have it. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the thought you put into it. And I would underscore something else you said. You know, you can read anywhere you want these days, it seems, articles and watch TV or listen to radio about the changing nature of retail and zombie malls and things closing and too much empty space in these things. But there's always, any responsible article always has a caveat. It always says, if a property is Class A and it's located in an affluent area, it succeeds. We believe this is the perfect spot in America to build this facility. And when this facility is built, it will be, trust me, a Class A mall. It will be the top of the food chain in terms of retail facilities. So if that relieves some folks' anxiety, and I hope it does, just bear that in mind as we go through this. The other thing, and there was a speaker up here, and I'm sorry I didn't get her name, and I don't know if she's still here, and she said, you know, once you change this definition of anchors of high quality, nobody will ever get to review it again, and that's not true. I mean, we still have a zoning process to go through. I mean, you know, let's say 12 years from now, we're trying to, you know, we're in the unfortunate position of having to substitute an anchor, and it might not be a traditional department store. Some people might be saying, oh, is that the right thing? We still have a zoning process to go through, and you still have your rights under your LDA to dispute our opinion with us. So nobody's giving up any rights they have under the LDA. We're just trying to come to a common understanding on how to interpret that language. That is really the bedrock of what we're trying to do. That's all. That's all. Doug, perhaps it's a good time for you to give your presentation, and then we can circle back to any technical issues you have. Great.
Thanks. I want to thank the Planning Committee for bringing this forward so quickly to the full council. We've always felt it's best to be transparent and bring everything out quickly. And this council has been very attentive over the years, as members has said, and we appreciate the previous attention and the previous unanimous support the council's given to this project along the way. And I'm sure you'll give this, our request, similar attention. As Bill Hennessy noted, we're asking for two modifications that are at the heart simple, I think, but not to underestimate their importance both to the city and to us. Again, it's important for us to be able to move forward quickly because we are out of time without adding the third use to the project, and to clarify the intent of the language, since it is language that will survive for 15 years after we're open. That's probably about closer to 18 years or 9 councils in political language. So I won't belabor the approval process, but you know the requirement is to provide one of those 3 additional uses in addition to retail. And we looked at them and felt that the hotel was the most feasible and also the most likely to be compatible with what the bulk of the project is. And we took that seriously when the council, we got our approvals, we went out. We are a retail REIT. I think we were clear about this from the get-go. We don't develop hotels, we don't develop office. And we set about to try to accomplish this. And we did that. We hired a hospitality architect and designed a hotel. We hired a contractor who's built hotels and had him cost the hotel, and also value engineer the hotel to try to make the cost as low as possible. And we did this in concert both with the expertise of the consultants, outside consultants, as well as partners that we were beginning to discuss. In the end, we spoke to upwards of 12 partners. You heard from one earlier this evening. And frankly, the feedback was very consistent and very, in the end, negative. Last summer, fall, we began to discuss with the city and the agency our concerns about the hotel. We had quite a bit more time to come to this conclusion, but again, we prefer to bring it out in the open. And around December of this past year, when one of our final candidates passed, we brought it forward and said it's truly infeasible. We had approvals. We'd prefer to move forward. I think everyone here is disappointed, but again, we are out of time in terms of trying to get something to work that we are at this point certain won't work.
May I ask a question regarding that? Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Sure.
Yeah, yesterday you and I had a discussion which I thought was interesting. I presented you some of the numbers that Mr. Welch and I had talked about. The hotel,
sure,
roughly $475 million with an 8% return, $56 million for the hotel with a 4.4% return, and the difference being, from GGP's perspective, $2 million a year, compared to the city receiving over 17 years, roughly $200,000 when you break the $3.5 million. And you responded from a different perspective.
Sure.
About those numbers. And I would have, since there's been discussion, Mr. Welch did an excellent job, in my opinion. And his ideas, I believe, do deserve a comment from you.
Sure. And I'll comment as best I can. I've read and had discussions with them, and it's been helpful to discuss it. Again, we always try to address these things. And I'll go through it, and I think what will happen is we'll have to spend more time with it. But in essence, the net operating income of the property that you talk about doesn't include a lot of the other corporate overhead and the company behind it that operate. It is the property, the way real estate is typically accounted for. It is the expenses of that property directly related to that property. There's also all of the other things, including our cost of capital, the dividends we have to pay our shareholders to continue as a growing concern. And I think most people that work for a company or involved in a company or just understand sort of basic finances, you have to sort of, you've made certain representations, your company is set up a certain way with the way it operates, the way it's valued, and the shareholders, and you need to maintain those. So to look at just those top line metrics, I think is not a completely fair representation. For instance, if the gap is $2 million in income between the two, that income gap has a valuation, right? So at an 8 cap, which is a fairly standard metric, that's about $25 million in value. That's like saying, well, the house may be worth $350,000, but it's going to cost me $550 to build it. And I can afford the $200, but so be it. There's a value to that income stream that is unsustainable to just accept that as a loss. It takes the overall project to a place where the company would not invest the capital.
You also mentioned the difference, the inability, or the why you wouldn't blend in the rate of return for the hotel,
sure,
which is a part of the project that is very small. But your answer, I thought, was also interesting, and I think should be.
As I said at the beginning, we don't develop hotels, or we're not a hotel REIT. There are hotel REITs out there, so we would have to bring in a partner, as I said, who would own and operate the hotel. So we have to make the hotel work in a way that those partners come in, they look at it as an independent investment, they have their returns, and they look at it and they all come to the same conclusion. It is by a factor of 50% off what our minimum hurdles are. We cannot invest. And I can't take that sort of drag from a non-core asset and just sort of, for lack of a better word, bury it in my asset, right? When I'm a publicly traded retail REIT. It's just the two don't mix, and I need to keep them both standing on their own if they're to work.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Mr. May I ask, piggybacking on,
yeah.
May I ask why, can you get me to the significance of that 50% number? Why is it at that point where it's not feasible and it's at 50%?
The uniqueness here is the site.
Just so we can understand.
Sure. The uniqueness of the site, and it's in the materials, is that to build the core asset, which is the retail, there's certain dimensions and size that need to be maintained, and the site is extremely tight with boundaries that cannot be essentially modified. I got West Avenue, I-95, the railroad, and a historic church in the south. And I'm bounded, there is no additional room. And a hotel to function needs a certain curb appeal, it needs an entrance, so there are very few places to put it on the site. But regardless of where I put it, it's got to go up in the air, and it becomes high-rise construction, similar to what you would find in New York or Boston, et cetera. So I have a cost structure that is almost double what it would be to build a hotel on grade that we find in Main Avenue or the Residence Inn, et cetera. But I'm competing for room rates where you can go to the DoubleTree with a very nice hotel and rent a room there for, based on a cost structure of either a hotel that's built or a hotel that's built on grade with parking, no structured parking at all. When you put those things together, we end up with such a mismatch of the cost to build the asset and what I can generate for the hotel owner. It doesn't work.
One more follow-up. Just a little bit more specific on that point, Doug. So how long would it be, because you look for a break-even point and then a profit point.
Sure.
So how long, because all these hotel partners that you've been talking to have not wanted to come on board.
Sure.
What is that length of time that they're saying that they'll be operating at a loss for? It's going to be, in other words, it's telling you we're going to be operating for a loss for too long until we are in the black. What is that time gap?
Honestly, it's almost infinite. And I'm not being facetious. That their cost of funds is X, and the hotel returns less than X to start. And you build up such a deficit, right? So every year you're paying out $6 and taking in $3. And you're carrying that deficit, that over time, sure, room rates would escalate to the point where potentially it becomes profitable. You've got to make up all of your losses before. So they're looking at well over a decade.
So no matter who the partner is, you're talking about sustaining losses
for years,
for the lifetime of their occupancy, which business-wise doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Ms. O'Toole, Darko?
I'd like to propose an amendment. I don't know if you were going to close things or what you were about to do. I just don't want to lose my opportunity. I think our concern is getting a little bit more language in this motion. I have something prepared. We can vote it up, we can vote it down, but I'd like to at least say it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Approve City and Redevelopment Agency to open negotiations with Norwalk Land Development LLC, GGP, related to the removal of the proposed hotel in the LDA and to revisit the definition of an anchor of high quality. Once these discussions have been followed through our due process, including public hearings, all final documents will return to the Common Council for review and approval.
I may be mistaken, but I believe just the idea of removal of the hotel. Are you including the other uses? Are you leaving it open for the other uses to be declared infeasible, or is it just the hotel?
Open.
I'm not sure I understand that.
Doug is here, so that'd be.
Right? To open negotiations related with the LDA. Just revisit that. You don't need to be specific, right?
I was trying to be specific, but if that's the issue, then we can take that out. I mean, we just found out tonight that there's going to be public hearings and such. I want that to be part of, on the record and part of the process. Sorry, John, you can roll your eyes all you want, but we've been through this for years.
Okay. No.
This is the hugest project that Norwalk will see, has seen, and will see. We've got to do it right and do right by the citizens.
Would you like to have in there language requiring that there be public hearings?
That's what we're trying to get to,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
this may be too much or too specific, but I think in a nutshell what Shannon's trying to say is that we want to make sure that the public has input
Well, I think what, let me just, so I think Ms. O'Toole-Gerundurko started saying, approve the city and redevelopment agency to begin discussions.
I said open negotiations.
Or open negotiations to modify the Reed-Putnam Urban Renewal Plan and Amendment Number 4 of the Land Disposition Agreement. And then would you be satisfied by indicating in there that after the required public hearings, that this would come back to the Common Council for final approval?
I had said once these discussions have followed our due process, including public hearings.
Yes.
All final documents will return to the Common Council for review and approval.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, without indicating the infeasibility of any of the three uses.
If I could just make
Mr.
one
Coppola?
suggestion. I think we had spoken earlier, because literally with 1 minute before the meeting, so it's always tough to do. I think there's a little confusion as to exactly what the process is going to be from today to the until the final vote by the council. So if Mr. Sheen could just come up for one moment, he may be able to clarify, I think, some of the concerns that your caucus has to process. And one concern I believe that you had, and we discussed shortly before the meeting, was that you want to make sure there was at least one more public hearing to discuss the proposed changes here prior to this coming back to the council for a vote. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I think that was one of the, or the purpose of the amendment to the motion. And if, in fact, that's already going to happen, maybe the amendment's not necessary. But I'd like to just hear from Mr. Sheen. If you could just confirm the process from today through when the council votes on this.
Well, again, as I said earlier, I think, though, the question is, do we, if I heard the motion correctly, it sounds like there's not, it doesn't authorize us as staff to actually make the modifications and present the documents back to the various committees. It sounded like you were advancing discussions about negotiating and starting a process of negotiation when GGP has in fact come back with a recommendation for changes. And the question would be, it sounds like we're coming back to renegotiating the process. I mean, if the question is public hearings, why not add to the existing motion the requirement for public hearings both at the planning committee and at the redevelopment agency level?
I think that's part of it. That's.
Would that accomplish, I think, what you're, I mean, I know when we spoke earlier, that was your main concern.
Yeah, that is the concern. We've gotten to this point, all these meetings have taken place, and we've gotten to this point that GGP has come with their ask, but none of this has been in the public until a brief meeting last Monday and tonight. I think the public should be at all these meetings and have an opportunity. If we had known that all that was going to go on, that redevelopment was going to have a public hearing and planning commission was going to have a public hearing and it still has to go to zoning, that wasn't made clear until we got here tonight. So that's why there's pushback to make some modifications, because we want to make sure that the public gets to hear all of this.
May I make a suggestion?
Mr. Igneri.
Shannon, if we take the item C1 and in the last sentence, all actions required, comma, including 3 public hearings or 2 public hearings, comma, to prepare the respective documents for Common Council's final approval. That would work.
Yeah.
Now, I understand where you're going. That's why I asked before about how many public hearings there will be public hearings, because I wanted that stressed. And I think that's a good way to include it and not change the process.
Ms. Maggio.
I just had a question not related to the amendment, because I heard something that Tim said. I've been a fan of them all from the beginning. I've been on board. However, I do have some concerns about like what's rapidly happening right now. What you said was, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are authorizing you to make the modifications proposed by GGP and then send it through the things, not reopen negotiations. However, Mr. Kimmel, when he asked the question, could we then say 3.5 is too much or 3.5 is too little, can we work and tweak the modifications that GGP has recommended? The answer was yes. So now I'm confused. Are we
Yes,
just approving the modifications that they recommended, or are we still allowed to?
You're
have a-
authorizing us to modify the documents and to circulate the documents. What will ultimately go to the various boards and committees is ultimately what's currently approved and what's being proposed. So they're ultimately going to make a determination as to where they stand, and they being the Planning Commission, the Redevelopment Agency, and the Planning Committee and others, including, zoning's actually working not necessarily on these documents, but on the project from a zoning perspective. But they're going to make a determination as to what their opinions are relative to the modifications. For example, the modification to the Urban Renewal Plan and the LDA, the Planning Commission typically writes back to the Common Council and says, for example, if they feel that the number that GGP has proposed of 3.5 should be considered as another number, they would advise you of that. And then it's up to you as the Common Council that's a party to the agreement, the LDA, to make a determination as to where you stand relative to those numbers. I hope that's clear, but you're not approving anything, us finalizing any document on your behalf.
Okay.
So, Ms. O'Toole, Giandirko, were you comfortable with the language read by Mr. Igneri as an amendment?
Yeah.
So if Mr. Igneri would read the language.
She could first withdraw.
I'll withdraw my.
If you withdraw yours, Mr. Igneri, if you will read yours, and then we can discuss that and if there's any further discussion.
Okay. I am proposing modifying C1 to approve city and redevelopment agencies, approve city and redevelopment agency staff to modify the Putnam Urban Renewal Plan and amendment number 4 of the land disposition agreement as requested by Norwalk Land Development LLC, GGP, and to undertake all actions required, including 2 public hearings, to prepare the respective documents for Common Council final approval.
Okay, Mr. Livingston.
Yeah, one minor tweak. Can you make it including at least 2 public hearings? Because I heard there might be more than 2.
Okay.
At least 2.
Okay.
I have a question. I think there's going to be more than 2 public hearings.
Right.
But I just want to make sure that when we talk about public hearings, in your resolution, you're not requiring 2 public hearings before the Common Council.
No.
Right, okay.
As part of the process. That's what I'm after.
The global process,
Planning,
redevelopment agency.
Planning committee, planning commission, everybody that's going to have to see this again.
Yes, that was the motion.
So I will tweak that slightly to all actions required, including at least 2 public hearings, to prepare the respective documents for Common Council final approval.
Ms. Bowman.
So I just want to, technically, so what I'm hearing is, I just want to put things into perspective. So the deal that was in the paper is still technically in negotiation, and it's just getting into a stage where it's actually technically on the table. And the price, the amount can change depending on what we feel and what each committee now sees. Am I understanding that correctly? Yeah.
Yes, no final changes to the Urban Renewal Plan or the LDA are in effect as of this vote this evening.
Yes.
And the discussions or the meetings that were held with council leadership and others were that to try to come to an agreement or an arrangement that we felt everybody could buy into. The proposal.
In other words, we're still on let's make a deal instead of the Price is Right.
Yeah.
If that's the way you want to put it, perhaps.
That's how the metaphor works right now.
Any further discussion? Mr. Bonifant.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks. Through this, I appreciate what Mr. Kite said before. I want to take him at his word because it was important. I'm not going to tweak Mr. Igneri's motion, but it's important that an elected body pays attention and not just a planning commission, and a zoning commission don't have to answer to the public. It's important that, and I'll take Mr. Kitey's at his word on that one.
Mr. Corsello.
Yeah, I just have a question, perhaps it's best directed to Corporation Counsel. Is there any difference from the amended motion and the motion that was originally here, which requires, and basically it's just something about public hearings. Public hearings were required anyway. So why are we amending the original motion? That's what I'm trying to figure out here.
In my opinion, we're amending it to make very clear to the public that they will have opportunity to speak.
Yeah, and I think also.
But hasn't that been made very clear tonight?
No, the process, quite honestly, the process.
And up until now, no.
The process is unique that we have here, and that the project is going through, so I don't think it was clear. I was asked a question just a minute before the meeting, and I had to think about it a little bit before I could even answer, and I wasn't 100% sure.
Okay.
So the answer is no, it's not that clear. I think the motion clarifies that there will be at least 2 public hearings of the Norwalk city agencies. I think that's important to address the concern that the Republican caucus had.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as the amendment to the motion, right?
We're voting on
The amendment.
The amendment. All opposed? And any abstentions? So we have 1 opposed, Mr. Kitey's. Now, we vote on the motion as amended.
Can we, no?
All in favor of the motion as amended? Opposed? And abstention. So the motion passes 12-1 with 1 opposed, Mr. Bonifant.
Wait, 2?
Pardon me? He opposed it.
With everything that was, I voted in favor of this going.
Yeah, just Bonifant.
I only saw 1 hand go up.
Sorry. I saw the hand go up.
Is there another motion on the table for the evening?
Adjourn.
Oh, I did adjourn. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? We're adjourned.